There's a story in your family. You've heard it your whole life, maybe at a kitchen table, maybe from a grandmother whose accent softened a little more with every passing year. And it goes like this. Your family had a different name once, a longer name, a name from the old country. And when your great-grandfather stepped off the boat at Ellis Island, tired, seasick, clutching everything he owned in a single bag, a clerk looked up at him, couldn't understand a word he said, and simply wrote down something easier, crossed out 400 years of a family name with one stroke of a pen. There's even a version people swear is true, a man so overwhelmed by the noise and the crowds that when the inspector asked his name, his mind went blank, and in his panic he blurted out, in Yiddish, "Schoin vergessen, I've already forgotten." And the clerk, so the story goes, wrote down exactly what he heard. Sean Ferguson. It's a wonderful story. Families have told it for 100 years. There's just one problem. It never happened. Not to Sean Ferguson. Not to your great-grandfather. Not to anyone. Because the one thing nearly every American believes about Ellis Island, that they changed your name, is a myth. And the truth about what really happened to your family's name is a far better story than the one you were told. Almost every family that came through Ellis Island carries some version of it. The Italians, the Poles, the Greeks, the Jews of Eastern Europe, the Germans, the Irish. 12 million people passed through those doors between 1892 and 1954, and it feels like half of America is descended from someone who walked across that great tiled hall. And the name change story survives because it does something kind. It explains the gap. It explains why the name on the old headstone doesn't quite match the name on Grandpa's mailbox. It turns a confusing little mystery into a clean, simple villain, the careless clerk who couldn't be bothered to get it right. It feels true. It feels like something that would happen. But feelings are not evidence, and the moment you look at how Ellis Island actually worked, the whole story falls apart. Here is the fact that ends the myth. The inspectors at Ellis Island did not write down your ancestor's name. They couldn't have, because the name was already written, thousands of miles away, weeks before your ancestor ever saw the Statue of Liberty. When an immigrant bought passage on a steamship in Hamburg, or Naples, or Liverpool, the shipping company wrote their name onto a document called the Passenger Manifest, right there at the port of departure, in Europe, by European clerks, who spoke the immigrant's own language. That manifest traveled across the ocean on the same ship. When the ship docked in New York, the Ellis Island inspector was not sitting there with a blank page, inventing names. He was holding that manifest, the one filled out in Europe, and his entire job was to check the person in front of him against the name already on the list. He was a fact-checker, not an author. Philip Sutton, a historian at the New York Public Library, put it plainly in a piece that has quietly demolished this myth for genealogists everywhere. Officials at Ellis Island created no records of immigration. They worked from the records the immigrants brought with them. So the clerk could not have changed your name. He was never the one who wrote it down. If a small piece of paper written in Hamburg just rearranged everything you thought you knew about your family, subscribe. This channel goes where the records actually are, not where the legends want them to be. But what about the language? Surely the confusion was real. A frightened immigrant, a clerk who spoke only English. Mistakes had to happen. Except the clerks very often did not speak only English. Ellis Island ran on interpreters. The inspection line was staffed by men who, between them, could handle dozens of languages, because the whole operation would have collapsed otherwise. And one of those interpreters, in the years around 1907 to 1910, was a young law student working the line to pay his way through school. His name was Fiorello La Guardia. Yes, that La Guardia. The man who would become the most famous mayor in the history of New York City. Before all of that, he stood on the Ellis Island floor and translated for the endless river of arrivals, because he spoke Italian, German, Yiddish, and Croatian. He was not confused by these people. He was one of them. He understood every word they said. That is who was working the line, not a bored bureaucrat butchering names he couldn't pronounce, but, very often, someone who spoke the immigrant's own language better than the immigrant spoke English. The confused clerk story needs the clerk to be ignorant. The real Ellis Island was full of people like La Guardia, who understood exactly who was standing in front of them. But here's the thing. The names did change. That part is true. The name in the old country really was different from the name your family carries now. So if Ellis Island didn't do it, who did? Your ancestor did. Not in a single traumatic moment at a government desk. Slowly, deliberately. Over years, sometimes decades, in the streets and shops and schoolrooms of America, Joe Van Nee started introducing himself as John because John got the job and Joe Van Nee did not. Mueller became Miller because it was easier for the foreman to yell across the factory floor. Rosenberg became Rose. Kowalski became Kowal, then Cole. This was not a mistake done to them. It was a choice made by them, a quiet daily act of trying to belong, to stop being the foreigner, to give their children a name that wouldn't hold them back. Historian Marion Smith, who spent a career studying immigration records, found that immigrants changed their own names constantly, and often made it official later, in their own hands, when they became citizens. The name change was real, but it wasn't a wound, it was a decision. And you can watch it happen, right there in the documents, generation by generation. Pull the ship manifest first, the one written in Europe. There's the original name, spelled the old way, in full. Then find the same family in the census 10 years later, and you'll often see the spelling has already begun to drift. An American census taker, writing down what he thought he heard on a doorstep. Then find the naturalization papers, the day your ancestor became a citizen, and there, more often than not, is the moment the change becomes official, not forced, chosen. Sometimes the new Americanized name is written in your ancestor's own signature, at the bottom of the page, in ink they controlled. 3 documents, 1 story. And in none of them is there a careless clerk erasing your heritage. There is only a family, step by step, deciding who they were going to be in this new country. The records don't lie. The legend does. Now, let's be honest, because this channel would rather be right than tidy. Were names ever recorded wrong? Of course. But the errors, when they happened, were almost always made in Europe, at departure, by the clerk filling out that first manifest, not in New York. And Philip Sutton's own research turned up rare, documented cases where a name genuinely was altered in the immigration process. It happened, just not the way the legend says, and nowhere near as often. The myth isn't that names never changed. The myth is who changed them, and why. The legend hands the pen to a stranger. The truth puts it back in your ancestor's hand. And that changes everything about how you see them. In the legend, your great-grandfather is a victim, a tired man at the mercy of a system that couldn't even be bothered to spell his name. Something was taken from him. But the historian Vincent K. Nateau, who wrote the definitive history of Ellis Island, describes something very different. A place not of erasure, but of transformation. And the real story of your name is a story of agency. Your ancestor looked at a country that didn't yet have room for who they were, and they made room. They shed a syllable, anglicized a spelling, chose a name their children could wear like armor. That is not weakness. That is one of the bravest things a person can do, to arrive with nothing and decide, deliberately, to become someone new. The name wasn't stolen from your family. It was authored by them. If your family carries one of these stories, do this. Don't just repeat the legend. Go pull the manifest. It still exists, digitized, searchable, waiting. Find the original spelling, and then follow it forward and watch your ancestor become American one document at a time. Subscribe, and I'll keep showing you exactly how to read what your family actually left behind. So the next time someone at the table tells the old story, the clerk, the crossed-out name, the stroke of the pen, you'll know. It's a beautiful story, it's just not the true one. And the true one is better, because it wasn't done to your family. It was done by them. Now I want to hear it. What name does your family swear was changed at Ellis Island? Drop it in the comments, the old spelling and the new one, and I'll tell you exactly where to look to find the truth. Because somewhere in the records, your great-grandfather is still signing his new name, and he chose every letter,